Welcome back for this bonus track of the Love Journalism Show. We're back with Neetzan Zimmerman, and I've got some extra questions. Fair warning, we're going to go a little bit deeper. Uh, Neetzan, you said traffic in various points is ultimately just about whether you've been received and understood. And I wonder if you could speak, does a bookshop do better than a viral headline at accomplishing that?
I I think ultimately, um, each has its own sort of strengths and weaknesses when it comes to transmitting information. Um, but it comes down to the individual who is sort of responsible for transmitting that information at the end of the day. As certainly it's about being a good faith actor in all things. I think that is where personal responsibility comes into play in journalism more than anywhere else. I think I mean, maybe a doctor or a lawyer, but I think we should all just practice good faith behavior in our daily living. Um, there really is no way to overcome that obligation
Mm,
to our fellow man. I
mm,
think that is where I am coming from in all things, regardless of whichever track I'm taking, whether digital or analog. The goal is to we said at Cheeseburger when I was starting out, we said make someone happy for 5 minutes a day, and that's always stuck with me because I think as a person, as a human being alive on planet Earth, that's as much as you can really hope to accomplish. And so that's what I try to do in all things.
mm. The last time I had you on with Ben Smith, and I think I started that conversation with asking you a question, just phrased straight up explaining traffic to my readers, listeners at the time. I was wondering if you can explain something to for someone who has no idea what the job is that we do, and your claim to fame is really at the very beginning of your career. You were accomplishing it was 17.3 million unique visitors in a single month. What does that mean? Can you basically unpack what that means? And what does that mean in the internet of 2026 too?
Yeah, I mean, the internet was a wasteland at the time when I was starting out, and we were figuring things out as we went along. I think both on the content side and on the business side. And someone somewhere had the bright idea to merge those two things, thinking that was the quickest path to accomplishing in the digital space what we had long accomplished in the print space. Um, which was ultimately, keeping this enterprise afloat. Like, how do we keep going? How do we ensure that writers get paid what they're worth, and that articles are produced, articles of quality are produced, and editors are, everyone gets paid, even though we no longer have the backbone of classifieds and other things that kept this machine running. Um, and so the idea was, okay, well, how do we accomplish that now that we have all this knowledge of who is viewing what and for how long, and um, how are they engaging with this product? Are they leaving a comment? Are they liking it? What is their reaction ultimately? And that gave birth to the term monetization, which has been bastardized several times over to now mean absolutely nothing. But initially, it just meant pay for. It meant keeping the lights on. That's essentially what it came down to. And so for me, my role in all this was drive as many eyeballs as possible to our frame of this information, which, again, I hope was the most accurate frame at the time, or certainly the one that I felt would be best suited for the busy lifestyle of an average news consumer. We can unpack that in many ways. But ultimately, I wanted to ensure that quality journalism was being produced. And what that meant was sometimes I would have to be the entertainer, right? The person in between acts, who puts on a show and juggles balls and swallows a sword. And so that was the role that I took on. And so knowing that, and attempting to accomplish that, I was trying at the time to encourage as many people as possible to read, consume my articles in particular, which is, how we get traffic. But traffic in and of itself, which you asked the latter half of your question, I think hopefully this will answer. I think now it's come to mean traffic for the sake of traffic. At the time, it meant traffic meaning views, meaning engagement, meaning interactions, meaning people consuming content, right? But at the time, the goal really was to fund real journalism. The goal was to make real journalism. How do we do that? How do we pay for it? It costs money. It's expensive having to send someone out in the field for 4 months where they produce nothing. And then they come back with a real piece of journalism, right? How do we pay for it, right? We produce content every day that ultimately, lines those coffers. That's how we do it. At some point, that same brilliant person thought, well, why are we doing the second part? Let's just do the first part where we send people to the website. Who cares about the second part? And that's where personal responsibility kicks in. And we didn't get to talk about that on the main show, but we should talk about where journalism has ended up as a result, because I think that's where you end up with certain organizations going under and certain people becoming unemployed who are extremely talented at the work of journalism, which is becoming less necessary according to the powers that be every day.
Mm. Uh, Perfect follow-up question. So do you think that chasing traffic revealed something about audiences that journalism and journalists didn't want to see about themselves in itself?
That is a terrific question. That is a terrific question. Okay, because I think that I may be one of the only people who I think will answer this question legitimately, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I do think a lot of people have copped out when it comes to this question. We have always, always, always had tabloid journalism. I'm very sorry. Like forever and ever and ever. Like that is not, the internet did not invent that. People try to blame the internet, they try to blame Gawker, and they try to blame all sorts of places for inventing yellow journalism or whatever clickbait,
It's the
right?
plot of
Whatever.
Citizen Kane, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. It has always been with us. It has always been and I'm very sorry. The reason it's always been with us is because people like to read low as much as they like to read high. The answer is to have both, high and low, right? And I think it's important for an organization to embrace both and to retain both, right? And again, that goes back to personal responsibility. Nothing will ever take the place of personal responsibility. At the end of the day, you have to acknowledge that not everyone's going to read everything. Not everyone is going to be curious about everything. There are different people in the world. They have different interests, but there are certain things that can at least bring people in to where you can now expose them to those things that you want them to know. That's the way it works. And I feel like if you're trying to go against that, if you're trying to go against human nature, have fun. But it's really just not going to work. And I feel like a lot of people know this. Fewer people want to admit it. But the end result is that we've done away with the high completely because the people who have taken over are only interested in the effects of the low. And that has resulted in people going back and saying, well, this was always a mistake. But it wasn't. We just have to have the right people. And unfortunately, this is capitalism. I'm not going to get too political about it, but that's the way it works. At the end of the day, the people who pull the purse strings, they get to decide. I don't know how else to do this, but at the end of the day, every single experiment, and you've been there every step of the way, every single experiment where, and there are some good examples of where this has worked, but it's always very small scale. It's never going to be the New York Times. You're never going to create a co-op that becomes the largest media entity in the country that everyone reads and everyone knows every word of every article by heart. That is never going to happen. So the only solution is to have, again, good faith actors, people of strong moral character, leading the show. How do you put those people in positions of power? I don't know. That's where I reach my limit. I've bailed, so I certainly don't know. But
All
that's
right,
what you have to
so
do.
let's introduce something that did not necessarily exist in 2013, 2012 when you were dominating the internet, which is artificial intelligence. Arguably, the precursors to it were coming to be back then. But what's your take on AI? Are you embracing it? Is your head in the sand? What's your tool? What's your biggest challenge with it?
Uh, So first of all, I will say AI, I think, is a perfect distillation, perfect byproduct of everything that I was just talking about. Because in a world of shortcuts, this is the shortest cut, right? This is the destiny path that you cross to get from one point to another the fastest way possible. And it's a place you get to when everything else has been removed, when when long reads is defunct, right? Like when the pleasure that one gets out of reading a 50,000 word article start to finish and really going on that journey along with the writer and the editor and everybody else that took part, when that becomes passe, when that is no longer in vogue, then you get people trying to minimize exposure to everything, right? Like, and minimize exposure to thought. Don't make me think for a single second. Let me put in a single word and have that fleshed out into an essay, right? How do I get there without ever putting any thought into it whatsoever? That's where we're going, right? And we know how this story ends. I mean, we have as I said previously, in the other stream, we end up in a myriad scenarios that are all bad, all post-apocalyptic, and I don't think that's where we want to go. Ultimately, I hope that's not where we want to go. So I would say, as with everything, and as the mission of the store, let's pause, let's take a step back and think about what we actually need. Right now, I will say the one silver lining in all of this is that there does seem to be pretty intense pushback from younger people. Certainly, you maybe have heard, and maybe I should have made this the question, but you might have heard of all the booing at the commencement ceremonies around AI. Um, that that's not a mistake, right? That's young people seeing the writing on the wall as it relates to AI, and it's not AI as a tool. It's this idea that, again, these same capitalists, these same, the same, you know, the same bulldozer drivers that have, that have crushed and destroyed journalism, they're now coming for everything else, right? With this idea that AI is just going to be, be the replacement for every, aspect of human life, of people, and everything that humans contribute to the world that makes the world a place worth living in, um, and without any regard for the consequences, right? And I think that's what they're reacting to. They're not reacting to AI; they're reacting to this conversation around AI being, somehow better than people, uh, which is ludicrous. And they're reacting, I think, in exactly the right way. So I join them in booing for
Hmm.
sure.
Are you using it at all?
I don't use it. I think the extent that I use it, I think it's when it pops up as sadly the first result in any Google search, and my eyes will graze upon it before scrolling down and looking for the human driven links. Um, but I feel that it's again, to some extent I hope I'm not, but I do feel it is a bit of a losing battle because one cannot fight the tech giants of the world, single-handed. It's tilting at windmills, right? That's where we are. So, to the extent that I'm doing anything, I am opening the store, and I am trying to do my part in reminding people there is a way out for now. There isn't. There is still a path towards, a U-turn away from this, but it won't be there forever. And the more these tools are integrated into our daily lives, the less we can get away from them.
Hmm. You once said, "This is the stuff people really care about, not the stuff they're pretending to care about cocktail parties and you were talking about viral internet content. Now that you're selling used paperbacks and VHS tapes, how has your view changed?
I think what opening the store has shown me to a large extent is that that theory sort of proves true across all mediums. I think irrespective of what we're talking about, whether we're talking about music or movies or whatever else, people have opinions, people have thoughts, people like expressing those thoughts. I think what the medium does versus the message, as it were, is it allows you to, um, you know, really take your time with something that you enjoy. I think what the news at high speed does is, even if you're deriving pleasure out of something that you're engaging with or consuming, it ends so quickly that you are then compelled to move on to the next thing, and then on to the next thing and the next thing, and before you know it, you're doom scrolling for 3 hours. You've blacked out. You don't remember where you started. You certainly don't remember anything that you've just consumed. Um, and I think those opinions are born of dedication to a a relationship with a piece of art, a piece of culture, right? Spending time with something means developing a relationship with it, developing feelings towards it. Um, and I think we are losing something when we can't spend the time to really appreciate the culture that we're consuming these days, as it gets narrower and shorter. So I think that statement still holds true. I worry though that we have fewer and fewer things to talk about at cocktail parties these days than we used to.